Hi, everybody, and everybody at home. I'm Mike Morey. I'm the library director. This year, the library board is presenting a budget to the community of $1,623,550. This represents an increase of 1.09% from our 2017 budget. And cumulatively, over the last 4 years, since 2015, the total increase in the library's budget has been 1.16%, which worked out to dollars-wise is a grand total of about $17,000. So we've been able to keep things fairly steady after, some increases as we figured things out as the library grew, as we got into operation in the early years. The tax levy is going to increase by 1.51% to $1,227,460. This is actually still lower than it was in previous years, where it was closer to 1.4 million. The reason for that is that in 2016, New York State removed a lot of the LIPA properties from the tax rolls and replaced those funds with pilot funding. So we still get those monies, but they're not part of the tax levy. The highlights of where the increases are this year are primarily in personnel. Personnel expenditures are increasing by $40,000 this year. Now that might sound like a lot, but actually the reason for that is in 2016 we lowered them by $40,000. We previously had 6 full-time librarians, and we had a few personnel leave us early in 2016. And what we had decided to do was try to go down to 4 full-time librarians and then try to mix and match with part-timers and see if that would work, see if we could do it that way. That ended up causing problems for staffing. It ended up causing some problems as far as fulfilling some of the functions of the library, specifically things like readers advisory and some of our outreach services. So we've tried to come back now to somewhere in the middle. We're going to have 5 full-timers in 2018, a part-time librarian trainee, and still some part-time help. But this should help to create a steadier staff that will allow us to do more, and again, basically keep a steady budget from where we were. The other additional funding in the budget, we are going to try and do some things over here in the library annex next year to get more use out of the space. Primarily that is hopefully to include redoing the furnishings so that we might be able to have additional programs at the same time, some different types of programs, and the possibility of perhaps picking up a little bit of extra space in the building that would allow us to do that as well. Otherwise, a few things are up, a few things are down. Our insurance costs last year increased by $2,500, mostly because in consecutive years we had fire sprinkler incidents that resulted in, unfortunately, floods and some losses of equipment and damage to the building. That already happened. We're just adjusting the budget this year to account for those increases that happened. Everything else is just up a little bit, down a little bit, a few $100s here, a few $100s there. But again, we're basically within the same budget footprint and tax levy that we have been over the last 4 years. Does anybody in the audience have any questions? Should she identify herself to the camera?
Did she need the microphone?
Oh.
Oh, do I have to state my name?
No. You don't have to.
Okay.
If you like.
Well, all right, there you go.
Okay, that's fine. What is your question?
I have a question. You're going to upgrade this space here?
We are not going to be making, let me clarify that, we're not going to be making renovations to this building. The landlord of this building, who has changed in the last couple of years, is making upgrades. Like you'll notice there's construction happening in the hallways and the bathrooms. He's doing that. That's the owner of the building. What we're going to be looking to do is to purchase different furnishings. Perhaps they sell those divider walls that you can use to partition a room. We're going to be making improvements to this area that are furnishing-wise to allow us to use the space differently. We're not going to be doing any construction on our own in this space. Sorry about that. Yeah, no, it's not us doing construction to somebody else's building. It's more purchasing things that will allow us to make the room more flexible and to use it in different ways. Right now, right now we have staff in this room, and that takes up actually a fairly large chunk of the room. And we have the space here, and we move the tables around, but we don't have a lot of stuff we can do with it. If we make some changes, we're hoping to be able to make it more flexible in the way we're able to use it.
Well, what happened to
potential of a larger facility at some point. The board,
Nothing yet.
nothing yet. The board is continuing to investigate basically any lead that they have on a potential future facility. But even if we were to find a space, it's very likely that in most cases that would take at least a year and a half to go through a referendum process to make whatever changes to a building that we needed to build maybe a new building. So whatever happens in the long term, we know we're going to be in this facility for at least a year and a half to 2 years to 3 years. So if we can do more with this space in the meantime, that would be a good thing. And it also, you know, over the long term, maybe it kind of lights the way to what we need to do in a newer facility, right? Kind of gives us some better idea.
How much of an outlay are you going to put out to make this space the way you want it, like you're saying with dividers and?
Right,
We put
right.
in
We,
10,000.
we put about an additional $10,000 in furnishing into the budget. So it's substantial,
Yes.
but it's not substantial like, you know, actual construction would be.
One of the reasons why we wanted to do this was, one of our problems in our present facility is that we do not have,
Sorry.
oh.
Sorry, the library
We do
keeps
not have
doing
any
stuff.
space for quiet time or people to be able to sit and study. And we thought if we could make this space available not only for programs, but another portion for just a place for the kids from the high school who want to come down and do a project. Right now, we have 3 tables at the library, as you know, up the street, so
Right,
that
yeah.
this would give us some flexibility in having, when there's no program going on, or even if there is, say, a book club meeting,
Right.
the book club meeting could be in one portion of the room, but the other could then still be utilized for something else.
Right.
And so it was really looking at that need that got Mike into looking at a way of rearranging the furniture or doing some modifications. But the limit is, you know, with $10,000 you can't do too much.
Right.
But we might be able to alleviate some of the pressure up at the
Right.
other end of the block where
Right.
we've had many complaints about it's noisy and
Right.
they never can find a place to work.
Right.
We have the Wi-Fi here, and it would be a simple thing.
Right. In many ways, you know, parking is clearly an issue here. Space for collections is clearly an issue here. We do a lot with programming in this room, but the limit is 50 people, which works for a lot of things. But really, as Nancy's saying, one of our real biggest issues is if you're the 3rd or 4th person into the library and you just want to study, or you want to, you know, work on your business, or, you know, you want to meet with like a local group, you're very quickly out of a table. And that has real impact, especially on, like, say, the high school kids. I mean, we're not that far from the high school that this isn't walkable. But I know when I was a kid, if I got to walk 15 minutes with no guarantee of a spot, the first time that I don't find a spot,
You know,
I'm going to be upset. The second time, I'm not coming back, and I'm going to look for someplace else. And, you know, so the more that we can have that type of space available, the more people will actually try to use it, because we don't have a lot of it. And the quiet part is a constant complaint, because even when you get one of those tables, if someone's looking for DVDs, they're standing over your shoulder while you're studying, or that, yeah,
It is crowded.
right. So,
I'm just going to add one thing to that, Michael.
Yeah.
We realized that we were not attracting teenagers to the library, and we felt the efficiency in that, so that's one reason that
Yeah.
we like to be able to attract teenagers. And that's why we want to try to modify space here in Manhattan
Right.
to attract the teenagers.
How are
Not
they
an
gonna,
easy task.
no, how are they gonna be made aware?
oh, we have good relationship with the schools. We're always advertising. We tend to go to the school library sometimes and make presentations. So we'll certainly be, the second that we have something like that, we will certainly be letting them know all the time.
Put it in the
Yeah.
newsletter,
Right.
the hours.
Right.
and-
You know, the teen librarian is just, right, the
Yeah.
teen librarian has just started an Instagram page where a lot of the kids that we can kind of reach out that way and be able to put that in front of them where they are, which is, you know, these days a big thing, is advertising where people are as much as going directly to them. If you advertise in the space that they are, like Instagram, like Facebook, depending on the age group, you just put it, they'll see it. Even if it takes the 5th time they see it for it to click, it'll be something. You know, our website's important as being like a holding place of information, but for any library, that's not you're not hanging out on my website unless, you might be hanging out on the research part, you might be hanging out in the ebook section, but you're not just hanging out on the young adult website waiting for the news to change, so reaching out to them is usually important, and for everybody, really, at this point.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Does anybody else in the audience have any questions?
You have here also an EAP plan, an Employees Assistance Program.
Right.
Do you contribute to that, or do you have somebody who's running it?
It's a plan that we subscribe to. It basically is, I believe, $2 per month per employee, and we have 25, 26 employees that we pay for. It allows them access to counseling services, to all kinds of things. We think, being able to give them that opportunity to get help if they need help will hopefully help them, and then in turn make them even more valuable to the library because they'll be able to concentrate on their work, not have to concentrate on other things. So I think for the price of it, it's very reasonable to be able to give them access to that type of help if they should need it.
Thank you.
Michael?
Yes.
I have a question.
Yes.
I noticed the payrolls have gone up, both professional and clerical.
Right.
But the New York State retirement went from 115,000
Right.
to 100,000.
Right. The reason for that is, we are part of the New York State retirement system. It is somewhat based on, it is based off of the total payroll, but the bigger part of it is that it's also based off of the performance of the retirement system fund upstate. We were more paying in the range of $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 a year in retirement before the market collapse in 2008. When that happened, unfortunately, our payments skyrocketed to around $140,000. Over the last couple of years, they've come back down. So we're expecting to pay $99,000 this year, and that's continued to drop. It basically evened out over the couple of years because the first year where it did jump to $136,000, we were budgeted for like 80. So the next when it came back down a bit, and we were budgeted for 130 or 140 versus 115, basically. But we feel bringing it down, even though, again, it is a volatile factor that we don't know for sure until later in the year. We feel that because last year and the year before it has been lower, we have fund balance that if it did suddenly shoot up again, we can cover it that way. So it makes sense to put it at that number, deal with the preliminary estimates, and then if we have to change it, we'll use fund balance. But I feel confident in the number at this point, as the payroll has been fairly steady. Again, we're bringing it back up this year, but it was down, it's basically in that same range. It hasn't been like a $500,000 increase or something. And there's a couple lines like that in the budget this year where, like, early on in the library's history, we clearly needed more regular legal assistance as we were working through things. Now that we're stable, we've been open for a while, we've dealt with some situations. We don't need to call the lawyer as much. Our legal bills have been down. Well, okay, let's lower the legal line, use that for library operation, for collections, to help improve the collections, to help improve programming. And if, God forbid, something comes up, we do have fund balance to be able to use on it. But the last few years, we have needed less than we've budgeted. So it makes total sense to drop that down a bit. But still, again, have fund balance to be able to cover it if we need to. But I don't foresee anything coming down the pike that's going to become a major legal issue. And to go back to your question before, as far as future library facility, because the board has committed some of the capital funds that they have to future building improvement expansion, if we needed to, say, pay lawyers' fees for writing a contract for property or for having environmentals done, those funds will be used. The auditor will come in at the end of the year and use those funds specifically. So we could budget it there, but it won't get used for that because we've committed funds that are in fund balance towards those efforts. So it doesn't make sense to be like, well, maybe we should include a couple extra dollars in case that comes up, because it's not going to come from there anyway. Did that make sense? I might have just started babbling.
All right, another question. I know I've asked this before, but I'm like a dip, like when
No,
I'm
you're not.
online. You had here $5,000 for museum passes. I thought Friends of the Library did that.
The Friends of the Library support about half of them.